Hello, hello. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Today we're lucky enough to get to speak with AC Cross, author of the Boddicker Letters. And first and foremost, I just want to say, like, fantastic. It's seldom that I get to read an epistolary, and even from there, it feels like it's a much harder medium, and the quality scale is much different from, I guess, a more normalized novel. And watching Titus's kind of descent into madness, for lack of a better word, was really gripping. I found that it was just real tough to put down. And maybe it goes into the epistolary style where it's like shorter breaks and whatnot, but it was really gripping from the beginning to end. Hats off to you.
Thank you much.
I kind of want to hear Ryan say epistolary again.
How do you say it? Epistolary?
Epistolary, yeah. 10 points for using the word epistolary. I've just remembered what that meant.
I think the only other epistolary I've ever read would be Salmon Fishing in the Yemen.
Oh, is that the same where it's told through letters and stuff?
Yeah, that one's told through letters, and then you have like email chains, and it's just like in general, it's just like communication between people. There is no overarching narration. But I loved
Well, that's a
the combination between the letters to the editor and then the letters from Titus to Louisa.
yeah, I think that was a good place to that's a good place to start. So AC, tell us a little bit about the difference between because everything else I've read by you has been in a kind of classic narrative format. How different was it writing something in this kind of format?
Yeah, it was a lot different. I don't want to say easier, but again, it's a little less, a little more chunked out. It
Mhm.
was an idea I had been kind of mulling about for a little while. I am like hardcore into Lovecraft, sort of cosmic horror at this point. I'm kind of making that, I guess, my thing. Um,
Mhm.
but I had originally come up with the idea of Titus. He was actually out in the Old West,
Mhm.
kind of in the San Dios thing for where blood runs gold.
Yeah.
Um, and there was he was traveling with two characters. One called the Bad Man. I don't know exactly where that went. But basically, like he went out there to kind of journal the Old West, and
Mhm.
would send letters home to his wife. Um, and kind of one of the main moments was he wrote a letter talking about how they had come across a pretty gruesome scene in a glade where Native American and his wife had been killed by a couple of bandits, traders, whatever. And something about the wife reminded him of his own, and he just went ape and just slaughtered the bandits.
Mhm.
And wrote in the letter about like how this was not him, but it was him, and it just kind of spooled from there into the kind of just that. And you see that in Boddicker Letters too, so spoilers. Um, but
We'll get
the
right into spoilers, yeah.
yeah, just into the I am lost as one letter, and there's like
Mhm.
the gut punch of that was like I got to keep that somewhere. That's too I like that too much to let that go
Yeah.
anywhere else.
There was loads of little bits, especially near the end. If we're getting into spoilers, I can really jump into the parts that I thought had the kind of most lasting impact on me that I'll still remember. Because it was a fair while ago now that I read this, and there's several bits of it that I'll get into that are stuck in my head, like imagery and things like that.
Mm.
But towards the end, when the letters start deteriorating rapidly in quality and substance and the kind of things that are coming out in them, and the date starts going wild as well,
Mhm.
how much of that was kind of pre-planned and how much just came to you as you were getting to the end of it and kind of getting into the headspace of a guy losing his mind?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of took a the yeah, I see like a kind of a stone rolling downhill. Is that it starts slow, and then it just picks up speed and picks up speed and picks up speed, and so uh, more and more, like just reality broke down around him. And so
Mhm.
that was like, what can I do with this? Playing around with this format, what can I do to show everything he knows is deteriorating? And that kind of
Mhm.
went into like the dates and him having thoughts, crossing out thoughts, having new thoughts, kind of counteracting himself because he wasn't sure what was real, and just going and going and going to the point where he had lost any control over his own narrative.
Was the
Mhm.
was there any method writing that went into this?
I mean, there's always method writing, and I always go a little crazy with stuff. Um, I I did try. I wanted to tap into this. I wanted to create a character that was not particularly likable.
Yeah.
Um, because I mean, if you've read some of my other stuff, like Thorpe he's a jerk, but at the end of the day, like he's got a good heart to him. Um,
Mhm.
Titus, not so much. Titus was just kind of a loser from the outset, and it was
Mhm.
kind of interesting to see how that mindset can translate into the letters. This like grandiose self-importance, and how that broke down too. And so it was like, oh, I got to kind of use some of my arrogant stuff, the stuff that you kind of push down and never talk about. Kind of use some of that for him to be able to really kind of come out as that kind of character.
That's really cool. I think in any good character like that, you have to kind of dig into some unpleasant parts of yourself. And I think that's what made Titus feel so relatable for me was God, man, he just wants to, at least at the start, before you kind of have a better context for everything that's happening. But we'll get into the wee twist. At the start, I really just wanted him to succeed. And I also knew that this was an AC Cross book, so he probably wasn't going to. But
I think,
it was a really kind of lovable character at the start. And, it reminded me a little bit of the Terror. Have you read The Terror?
Yeah.
Yeah, see the relationship that Captain Francis has back home,
Mhm.
and it keeps kind of flashing back to everything that went wrong. And that it felt like that, where it was like God, he has this kind of one chance at almost something like redemption. He can kind of make good on his promises that
Yeah.
he's not been able to prove himself to everyone.
mm,
It's a really endearing character. So to then see him fall so so low, uh, or was he ever there to begin with? If we're doing spoilers, we'll
yeah,
get straight into the twist then, because the thing that I really loved about the letter format was that it was couched within an editorial, like a guy was saying, at least in the kind of what would you call it, the staging of the story, was saying,
Mhm.
look, we found these letters. So the letters all have to get there eventually. You know that this is after the fact, something happened. And so for the thing at the end to be that a lot of the content in the letters wasn't what had really it wasn't representing what had really went down. Did you go in with that at the start? Or was that another thing where later on you were like, oh, wait a minute.
That actually came to me like when I was writing near the end.
Ooh.
I was going as like he still has this through line, but he's
Mhm.
completely fallen. Like, what is it that's going to wrap up his story? It's like, oh yeah, no, this show like he was maybe not all there to begin with. As kind of a reframing of the rest of the story. Like maybe this showed how he was susceptible to all the stuff that went on.
It certainly felt like he got pulled in by the gravity of the whole thing. Like this was
Mhm.
going on anyway. He was just there and ended up part of it. And
but
it's the ending up part of it bit that because the stuff with the is it the guy that he's staying with? I'll forget names apart from Titus's, but the guy that he's staying with to do his
Yeah,
his law, his legal stuff and everything. His daughter becoming such a weird part of the story, like a strange kind of doorway into it all. I guess what I'm curious about is how much of it was like discovery as you went, and how much do you plan out this stuff?
yeah. I tend to be a huge pantser. I tend to
Yeah.
not. I tend to not have the story kind of built as it goes. That being said, since it was built around like the Lovecraftian setting, I wanted to make sure that I was
Mm.
including some components of it. Um, the guy who's staying with actually Marsh was a nod to Obed Marsh from the original
Uh-huh.
Innsmouth ones. I threw a lot of little Easter eggs into it. Could have maybe cut a few out, but I liked it too much to leave those in.
I always think if you're doing Lovecraft, you should embrace it and just do Lovecraft. Like I'm always, whenever I read the word Innsmouth anywhere, I'm like, oh, super brilliant. I know exactly what I'm in for now. It's like a big
Yeah, yeah.
warning sign. It's like, yo, there's gonna be some weird stuff. Cthulhu might show up.
One of the things I wanted to talk about, because I'm biased. It's one of the things I really enjoy, and I think really comes out in an epistolary. Is the just like the formatting and the way you write the story as a form of narration. Because obviously we're working with Titus here, who is the unreliable narrator. And I just like I pulled up a page here. I don't know if it's gonna pop up, but just like the way
Oh
you
yeah,
you write out and it's just all that, or you had sections where you had crossed out lines and this and that, like you see the narrator second guessing himself. You see the actual dissent. And I'm such a big fan of using grammar and using kind of the things at your disposal that you're not that readers wouldn't necessarily consider as storytelling tools. Like I think back to The Road by Cormac McCarthy, where there's very little punctuation, and that goes on to further emphasize the story. Was that always by design? Because obviously it starts out very formal and then it kind of falls, for lack of a better.
disintegrates.
Yeah, yeah, disintegrates, exactly.
Yeah, I there's kind of two components to that. One is I think that using that as a good way to illustrate a degrading mindset,
Mhm.
and that he's starting to second guess himself. I also one of my favorite books of all time is House of Leaves, by Mark
Oh
C.
my
Danielewski.
man, we're going to talk about House of Leaves.
Yep. And the fact that it's not just the story, but it's playing around with the conventions of the page. Um, and it's playing
Yes.
around with um, structure, playing around with fonts, playing around with all these things, and that really um, connected with me. Actually, in my very first book, I did that as well. I kind of played around with the conventions of the page using different fonts for different
Mhm.
things just to kind of test out and see how it worked. So that's always been something that's kind of stuck with me as it's a tool that a lot of writers don't use or maybe necessarily can't use based on the structure of what their book is. But in some cases with certain plot lines, you're able to extend yourself a little bit with these kind of creative uses of just structure.
It reminds me of a thing that I saw where I can't remember who said it, God help me, but it was talking about using the entirety of the medium. And obviously, the medium of writing is just the written word on the page, but that leaves out the page and what you can
Mm-hmm.
do with the space on the page. Uh, and I talk to like graphical artists all the time, like people who draw and paint and stuff, and tattoo artists and everything. And space is such an important concept, especially if you look at something like I don't know if you're familiar with Calvin and Hobbes at all, but the guy who
Yeah.
wrote Calvin or who drew and wrote Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson. Uh, you can buy the collections of him that have got his commentary on them. It talks about the use of space as like pacing and to create effect, and that things or the lack of things are equally important. And I got the sense of that in the Boddicker letters when, like, the page that Ryan was showing and with the dates going crazy and everything. And I could probably ramble for hours about House of Leaves and how it changed how I thought about how you can write, like, what you can do with a book.
Well, I
So I
think
guess my question then is there anything you've thought about doing that you've not had the chance to try yet, as regards format and weird space and things like that? So I read
Actually,
one recently that I've
yes.
got thoughts about.
Actually, yes.
Ooh.
I'm
Oh,
working on another story right now, and I need to kind of focus in and do it. Um,
mhm.
and I don't want to. I don't know if I want to spoil it or not because
Yeah.
I have to. It's one of those endings that I like. I have to make the book earn the ending. Um,
Mhm.
but it's going to adjust. How do I do this? Like Okay,
Be as vague as possible.
have you ever read American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis?
Yes, yes, I have. Yeah.
So you recognize like near the end, there's a scene where he's running away,
Hmm.
and then the book is like before that point is all in first person, and then mid sentence it switches to third person.
Yeah.
I I want to try something like that.
I say we
Um,
see that a lot in self-publishing,
yeah,
but but
Yeah,
on
it's not always
accident.
deliberate though.
Yeah.
It's not always done for effect.
It's a cool
That's really interesting.
I think
I was thinking of a similar thing recently as regards first and third because I don't know AC if you've ever read any of my stuff, but it's all third person present, and it all tends to deal with things that happen in the mind and the
mhm.
kind of there's a lot of the psychedelic experience in my work and stuff like that, or the influence of it, and the switch between third into first. I only recently wrote my first ever first person story. I've never written a first person story before. And the change in perspective, I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. There's something's going on a bit here. There's something to be explored here with the switch between the two and how the mind's eye kind of follows a different track afterwards. I think that's pretty interesting. I'm really excited to
yeah.
see what it is when it comes out. I'll guarantee you'll read it.
Yeah, I need to like focus in and actually just work on it. I have a bunch of like uh I got some here like I have pages of notes that I got from work that I write at work sometimes. I just need to put them
Yeah.
into the actual page.
Man, you're still running on analog. Still got pen and paper. And then
Yeah, when I'm at work I can do
notification.
that.
Yeah, I used to do the same thing. I used to have jotters and stuff like full of just. I remember one terrible job that I was at where the guy gave me a notepad and was like, "You'll write a business plan. We're going to do like direct sales." Terrible job. It lasted 2 weeks. But when he gave me the notepad, I sat there for about an hour and wrote out like an idea for a book that I'd been thinking about and just sketching out ideas. I had nothing to give him when I got back. How do you think? Have you ever tried writing long form on pen and paper?
I did kind of before I started actually publishing. Um,
Mhm.
I guess still have the physical copy of my first book, which is about every year or so I reread it to make myself angry about how bad it is. It's kind of like you know in Raiders of the Lost Ark where they open the Ark and all the Nazis face melt.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that except for my like ego. So I need to
All
keep
right.
that.
Okay.
Oh Lord.
So I keep it around to keep me humble.
Oh gosh. That was good.
I feel like you might have revisited that somewhat in Zoo, which we won't talk about on here because that is an entire different conversation. It's still one of the boldest things I think I've ever read. That was an incredible. That was a work of art, man. Still kind of in awe of that. But you
Yeah,
don't seem
thank you.
afraid of experimentation and stuff like that, which I think is a good quality to have for an indie author, especially.
Well, you also don't shy away from doing like there isn't necessarily the happy ending. You're not shying away from doing the hard hitting, gut wrenching kind of moment. We've said spoilers. I'm gonna say another one. Like at the end when Louisa's like, I don't know who this guy is. And I was like, oh man, that hits. Like what has been going on the whole story? Like makes you second guess everything. And not like in a negative way, but just in a like he really did he descend into madness or was he already there and like had a glimmer of hope or
Yeah, and that's one of the things I wanted to kind of bring out was again, it was really interesting, Steve, to hear you say that he was actually a lovable character.
Initially,
Because
no.
I at the beginning I really didn't like him. He was so
Yeah.
arrogant, so um,
yeah.
just beyond self-assured. Like this is an easy thing. I'm going to do this. I deserve better than this. I'll
Mhm.
do all these different things, and then just see him go and go and go and go. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, no. So he actually all these things he thought about himself weren't necessarily true. Um, because that's how it is for
Yeah.
a lot of us.
And then it was also the element of oh gosh, Solomon Trench, like that was the editor in chief, if I remember
Yep.
correctly. Um, I think that having that sort of stability kind of sprinkled in throughout the story helped keep everything kind of in check. Because I could imagine, for better or for worse, I trust Solomon. That was what I got out of this. It was like he's the level-headed, or they're the level-headed kind of individual that's redacting, or that's like bringing this out for the sake of historical or whatnot prevalence. So it was interesting to see kind of a reliable narrator, but not in the way that we would normally perceive that.
Mhm. Yeah, it was. I didn't want to just drop in with the letters without context because that's, I don't know. For me, it felt like that would have done a disservice because then that leaves questions unanswered, like, well, why should we care? Why are these here? Like, why are we just reading these letters? Like, there has to be some sort of structure around it. Like, hey, these letters are here for XYZ reasons. We want to make sure that he's okay. We want to check in. We want to do this all, and it's like for historical value
Mhm.
that grounds it in, okay, so we can believe this component of the story rather than just going completely willy-nilly and not being able to believe anything.
And like obviously this comes off as Titus's story. When you were writing it, and I'm actually curious, Steve, for you as well, when you were reading it,
Mhm.
did you give much thought to Louisa? Or was Louisa just like, she is here, but it's not about her in the slightest. Like I don't know like anything about her basically. Aside from what Titus says. Because I will say when I was reading it, it wasn't necessarily it was very Titus centric, obviously, but I didn't find myself really caring what Louisa was up to at times.
Yeah, it was for me it wasn't about her at
Mhm.
all of
Mhm.
the gushing things that he said, the purple prose, the declarations of devotion and love, it wasn't about her,
Yeah.
it was about him.
Mhm.
It was about him putting those down as well, obviously, again, with the assumption by that it's seeing like she's seeing it and she's impressed by all these things because like look how devoted this man is that loves me. He doesn't care about that. I don't think at any point he considered um, what she was feeling about it. And I don't know if you picked it up, but she never wrote back to him.
Well, yeah, that was the thing.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was never once a response. And I don't think I noticed it until maybe like a third of the way in where I was like, wait, this guy is just sent like this guy is
He's
like
gone beyond the double text.
yeah, like when you send a double text, you're like, oh, I'm gonna do it again. Like he just kept going.
I think that's partly why I liked it, and I think this is funny as well. Why I liked him so much to see initially when it was like, basically, please respond.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Like I'm trying my best out here, man. I think characters like that, and maybe this is probably indicative of what I like in stories and what I put in my own stories. I like characters that are ripe for a comeback, ripe for redemption. It's like, man, you're doing everything wrong. You could be doing this much better. And I love seeing stories where they develop and learn these things. But again, I was reading an AC Cross story that wasn't going to happen. But it is very satisfying in a weird way when it all clicks together at the end, and you're like, oh yeah, like I kind of yeah, of course he was like as if you couldn't tell from his texts,
Yeah.
this was going in a bad direction in the first place. But I think that's a classic trope of the kind of Lovecraftian subgenre, and something that I want to make sure that I ask before we have to finish up here today is tell me a little bit about your relationship and your history with Lovecraft and his writings.
Man, it's the idea of cosmic horror in general is so appealing to me. It's
Mm-hmm.
so it gives the writer complete freedom to create something. You can write short stories, you can write long stories, and if you build in a universe where all these different things can happen, that gives you a lot more freedom to be able to do those things. And I saw that with Lovecraft, is that Lovecraft and then the Lovecraft Cthulhu mythos is they all had this idea of, well, we can do more. We were not bound by this particular structure of we have to do these characters and these characters. Like, we can add in anybody. It's not about the characters or the stories or the plot. It's about the setting. It's about what is possible. And you saw that with, again, Where Blood Runs Gold. You saw that there as well with some of what's going on. Some others in that universe where you definitely see that going on. I like playing around with the unknowable because
Yep.
that's, you can do what you want.
Yeah, I feel like it adds to me at least, and this is why I love cosmic horror so much, why I love writing it, and kind of accidentally inject it into everything that I do. I can't really help it. Is that it's an automatic sense of depth and scale to the world. It's like, yeah, there's people dealing with normal people things, but also at the same time,
Mm.
you know, the stars are awake and we're burying them wrong. Like, you can just add in these little kind of cosmic horror sprinkles throughout to imply this humongous depth, like this deep oceanic kind of terror that lurks behind everything. And I think it just adds a lot of meat, a lot of flesh to the stories that we're telling. It's, particularly flesh if it's cosmic horror. There tends to be
Yeah, right.
there tends to be a lot of flesh in there. But I would love to talk about Where Blood Runs Gold as well, because that was one of the first stories that I ever read when I was looking for
Mm.
indie authors. When
this
at the genesis
I
of this whole thing that we're
I
doing.
remember that being mentioned like a year, like 2 years ago at this point.
Yeah, when I was like, Ryan, can we put this in? He went, nah, it's too big. I was like, oh,
have to be strict from the get-go.
We've been trying to put like a good Western box together for so long, and it started when I read Where Blood Runs Gold, and I went, man, this is great. This is like Jonah Hex meets Blood
Mm.
Meridian. This is great. Like all the things that I kind of love.
Mm.
So tell me a little bit about your favorite Lovecraft stories. What are the ones that really got you?
I love I mean, music of Eric Zahn is very cool. Dreams in the
Mm-hmm.
Witch House, obviously anything Innsmouth related.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and even some of the ones like Hostor is my favorite Lovecraft monster.
Yep.
And I spoiler alert, that may be involved with the story I was telling you about earlier. Um, but yeah, it's they're so unique and so otherworldly um, that you kind of have, as a reader and a writer, permission to imagine what you want. One of the big things with comedy and with horror is you will never write anything funnier or scarier than what the audience can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So for which one was it? I think it was Robocopter. Was they referenced Seattle a few times, and I will
Mm-hmm.
never say what happened there because it will never be funnier than what you could possibly imagine. Um,
Same
and
rules,
with
right?
causing thing, yeah,
100%.
it's the same thing as if you do a full description of something, it's not. But if it's like this kind of almost a suppressive feeling, it's like, oh well, this exists. What is so scary about it? You put yourself into that, which makes it scarier.
Yeah. And I think it gives you the opportunity and the freedom as well as a writer. Like, I've only ever written sci-fi and fantasy, but genre always feels restrictive in that I'm going to put horror in everything that I write. I'm going to put a little bit of cosmic horror in there anyway. There's going to be a little bit of many things. Is there any genres that you've really always wanted to write crossed over with cosmic horror?
Oh, there's so many. Like one thing that I've kind of, whether it's good or bad for me as a you know somebody who's trying to sell books, it kind of depends. Is I don't necessarily write for genre. Like my
Yeah.
first three books were kind of spy thriller comedy. Where Blood Runs Gold is like this kind of weird western. Zoo is like this kind of psychological memoir.
Mm-hmm.
Boddicker Letters is Lovecraftian epistolary. October Music is a bunch of short stories in the horror genre. So like I don't have a specific genre at this point,
Yeah.
but I would always be interested in kind of. I will try to cross over with anything and see if it sticks. Like I'm sure that
Yeah.
at some point I'll try to do a romance one with cosmic horror.
Cosmic horror
Um,
romance.
and
What's the
just
oh I'm sure Alan Moore done
oh
one
yeah,
that was like
oh
was it
probably
Necronomicon or something? It was something
yeah
like that.
Necronomicon,
Neonomicon.
yeah,
Neonomicon.
Neonomicon. Providence was the follow up to that one.
Oh yeah. That was an interesting read. I don't know
Those
if I'd
are yeah.
recommend it, but it was interesting.
I'd recommend them. Don't read them in public.
Yeah, I don't read them on the train. It's a romance after all with Lovecraft creatures in it, and
Mhm.
they have children and stuff. There's eggs.
Yeah, exactly.
It
Um,
gets speaking up before I can see the timer up here that
yeah,
says 4 minutes 20 or
go
something.
on.
But I would like to get one last one off about, did it come from somewhere or did you come up with it when they wheel the guy in who is heavily pregnant with weird eggs?
Oh, I came up with that one. It was like
What the hell, man?
I was like,
That was great.
how can this like I want to find the tipping point for him
Uh-huh.
where it became he was searching for these things, searching, and then he found it and it's not what he expected, what he wanted, and that's the tipping point into, oh no, this is very bad. And I'm like, how bad can you do it? Like you can do like, oh, cut his throat and there's blood. And that's that's too boring for Lovecraft. You gotta do something like viscerally upsetting.
Uh-huh.
I was like,
Literally,
well,
viscerally,
yeah. I was like, well,
like gut related, yeah.
yeah, like you have all these different fish that are like the baby Dagons. Like, let's rock and roll.
Um, one of the things I want to talk about, just because we have 3 minutes left, and I want to make sure we
Okay.
have all of our eggs in a basket here. For people who, for lack of better word there, for people who like the Boddicker letters, what would you recommend of yours they read next? And where's the best place they can find you if they have questions, they want to chat, they want to keep up with what you're working on?
Yeah, where blood runs gold for sure.
Yep.
What would be if you're looking for that? If you're looking for like horror Pringles, then the October Music. That was the most recent one that I published. And there's a bunch of little short stories.
Oh, cool.
And they can find me on Twitter, X, whatever, as at Danny's Cat Food. There's a whole story behind that. And
Do we
then
have time for the story? I've always wanted to ask why your name is Dan Eats Cat Food
I
and
can make it. I can make it. I
you eat
can
cat
say it very
food.
quick. So I
What?
have a friend Dan. I have a friend Dan in college. Super nice guy, very eager to please. And we were at a restaurant with a bunch of us, and we were joking around that how we could make him kind of do anything. Um, and we were like, I bet we could make him eat cat food. And he was like, no, no, I definitely won't. And we talked for a couple minutes, and then he said the phrase, okay, when I do this, not if, when. And I was like, game over.
Yeah.
Went from there. I actually had a whole comedy blog in college, the Denny's Cat Food. I put it on private now because it would get me canceled like crazy. Um, but yeah, and so I was like, I'm not gonna change the name. I'm gonna keep that on Twitter. And then on Blue Sky, I'm just Aaron C. Cross. So you can just find me there as well.
Um, but yeah, I think do you have any plans to write future epistolaries, for lack of a better
You
word?
know, I haven't not so far, but I will definitely not write it out, so to speak. Um, I've got like I have way too many works in progress as is. I have like 60, I think,
Mhm.
something like that. Um, so
God, wait, what?
Yeah, yeah. Like,
You
we
can't
got
say
60
that when we have
seconds.
a minute left.
yeah, no, I have a bunch. I think I have. Let me see. I have like 12 incendios. I have a whole like noir series. One where I just need to like finish cleaning up, editing, and publish, which has probably like 15. Roboverse has like 20. Bunch of other just little
I'm son.
stories.
That's really cool though.
Here's me saying I've read everything that you've written. I have not read everything that you've written, clearly. And I might not ever be able to.
Yeah, I might not be able to write everything I ever want to.
Yes.
On that note, thanks again for joining us, AC. If you made it this far, the story was the Boddicker Letters, and go read it. Thanks again, guys. Enjoy the rest of the day, and thanks for
Be a
joining us.
pleasure,
Thanks so
lads.
much. Appreciate it. Thank you.